Uh, Hi everyone. We're gonna be starting the workshop now. This is Bystander Intervention Training 101. And I'm Najia and I'm one of the presenters.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and I'm also a presenter in this workshop.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm also a presenter.
Okay, then I guess we'll start. Our presentation is gonna show you what a bystander is, what the bystander phenomena is, and also ways to intervene in dangerous situations, ways to find out and identify situations. And we're also going to be exploring oppression as well in this presentation. Without further ado, we're going to go starting. Um, okay. Um, this is the bystander effect. And we're going to start with Sophia, and she's going to talk about the bystander effect.
Okay, so the bystander effect is basically a psychological and social occurrence in which like a group of people see a bad situation happening, but no one intervenes. So like for example, like you're on the train and like maybe you see someone getting harassed by someone, like they're shouting at them, and everyone's kind of just like is aware that the situation is happening, but no one steps in and like helps that person out, so nothing ends up happening. So bias motivated harassment and violence. So basically what this is so basically there's warning signs. It could be microaggressions, stereotypes, slurs, and name calling, racist, sexist jokes, just things that like aren't really funny, things like that. And basically your bias could kind of be anything, but it could kind of be like, for example, maybe you're a white male and you just have something against Asian women for some reason. So you decide to call them slurs and names, kind of like making fun of them just because that's just how you feel. So some warning signs is discrimination, just harmful like speech, and just like hate groups, like for example the KKK could be an example of a hate group, just kind of discriminating against certain races and religions just because that's how they feel, that's just their bias. So there's many different strategies as a bystander, kind of just to figure out what to do in a situation and how to help people out. So there's 5 stages of active witnessing. One is noticing the event, interpret it as a problem is the second step. Third, assume personal responsibility, know how to help, implement the help is step 4 and 5. So for example, like continuing on the example that I used earlier about like someone being harassed on the train, if you're around them, one, you notice the event, you're seeing that this person is being harassed. Two is interpret the problem. Is this like serious? Do you think that you need to step in? Is this normal? Obviously, it's not. Three, assume personal responsibility. If you see that no one's helping and you know the situation is bad, you should feel like some moral responsibility to be like, hey, like this isn't right. I should step in. Know how to help. If it's a violent situation, it's really important to like know the different, like the line, because there is a line where it's like if it's violent, it might be dangerous for you to step in. And 5, implement the help. So if it isn't violent, maybe for example, you would go up and be like, hey, like what's going on, try and like calm down the situation before it escalates even more. But if it is dangerous, there are other options, maybe calling the police or notifying someone that works there, anything like that. So this is really important. There's 5 Ds of bystander intervention. One is direct, assess safety and speak up about the harassment. Delegate, get help for the person. Distract, take an indirect approach. 4, document, which means just like record it, take some sort of proof. And delay, before the incident is over or after, check on the person. So it's really important to know the 5 Ds because they can be really essential in helping you assess what's going on, and it can help you figure out the best strategy to make everything better. 8, verbal de-escalation strategies: saying no, broken record, saying the name of the behavior, saying I, we statements instead of just being like, oh, you, yada, yada, like stuff like that. Interrupting, assertive, ignoring, step it down, and lose to win. So yeah.
All right, since we just explored ways to help de-escalate a situation or intervene, I think to help us identify situations, it's important to explore oppression. And we're going to be going over some examples of oppression. Of course, these aren't like, all the examples out there, but here are some major ones that we're going to be going over. So racism, as through the example that Sophia brought up earlier about, an Asian woman being called slurs on the train, or hate groups like the KKK targeting specific groups of people like Black people or other people of color, that is mostly based on a bias towards racism, which is a prejudice, discrimination, or a form of antagonism directed towards, people who are in certain racial or ethnic groups, and this is usually referred to people who are minorities or they're marginalized. In the United States, this usually refers to anyone who isn't a white person, people of color. So once again, here's another example. In 2020, we saw that racism and harassment against Asian Americans had increased by 150 in 2020 due to the COVID-19 situation. And this arose from, direct antagonism just because these people were Asian. Next, we have ethnocentrism. This is also kind of connected to racism. Ethnocentrism is usually a cultural or ethnic bias. This could be like unconscious or conscious behavior. You might not know it. It might be something you grow up with. And in having ethnocentric views, you would see the world from the perspective of your own group, and you would also establish your group as the typical type of group, and rating all other people in order to surround yourself. In terms of ethnocentrism, this might exist in society as we see it today, with examples of white culture dominating America. Like you see white families, their expectations, what white people do as, the typical life of an American, which is an example of ethnocentrism. This ethnocentrism doesn't really apply to most other groups in America, like immigrants, people of color, and like that. Then we have xenophobia. Xenophobia could also, propel beliefs of racism as well as ethnocentrism. It's usually prejudice, fear, hatred of people who you believe can be foreign or from another country. This can apply to, this is mostly directed at immigrants who are, illegal immigrants, people who you believe are illegal immigrants, or even people of color who are immigrants. Next, we have gender oppression, and this is something that really applies to people who aren't cisgender males. It's attitudes, conditions, or behaviors that promote stereotyping of social roles based on gender, and these social roles are usually used to it's usually defined as oppression since it's related to these gender norms, relations, and stratification of a given society. It usually narrows people down into roles that are often harmful to treatment of them. And once again, this usually applies to, this is usually targeted towards people who are non-cisgender or not male, so women, trans people, and other gender non-conforming individuals. And this is usually dictated by, cisgender males. But this type of behavior with gender oppression could also be played on by people who aren't males either. Next, we have misogynoir. This is a type of behavior that, dislike and contempt for and prejudice against Black women and girls on the basis of racism and gender discrimination. This is usually, a crossroads of the two, an intersection of the two. Basically, it demonizes Black women and girls, and it specifically targets them. Moving on, we have sexual violence and sexual violence and sexual assault. It's kind of important to know what these two mean in order to, as I said before, to identify this type of behavior, because some of these behaviors you might not even recognize as like sexual violence or assault. So sexual violence is any sexual act that does not involve mutual consent. And we'll go on to what consent explicitly means in the next slide. But this includes any sexual act, unwanted sexual advances or comments, like someone decides to like catcall you, or someone makes an unwanted comment towards you. And this could happen to anyone, regardless of their gender, regardless of how old they are or where they could be. And sexual assault, this is usually more explicit instead of verbal actions like sexual violence can be. Sexual assault is the full range of forced sexual acts. This could be unconsensual kissing and touching and groping, but this could also be instances of rape, either vaginal, oral, or anal penetration. Once again, like sexual violence, it could happen to anyone, no matter where or at what time. And once again, it's important to define consent versus coercion. Consent and coercion, they could be mixed up as the same thing, but they're very different. Consent is permission for something to happen, and it's an agreement between the two people who happen to be doing the action. This consent is needed to be explicitly shared. Consent is something that you need verbal confirmation, complete understanding between the two parties. This is not something you have uncertainty about. Like, for example, if your partner says yes, but they change their mind later to what you are doing, that means they remove their consent because they are no longer sure and they don't want this thing to happen anymore. And then coercion is persuading someone to do something by aggression or through force. That could happen using violence, using verbal harassment, or pressurizing your partner to do this thing. Although like both, they both have an end goal to, achieve sexual actions or anything in that nature, the way of getting that goal is different, and it's important to always ask for consent and notice if someone's being coerced into anything that involves coercion. Now we're gonna watch a video to apply what we just learned. If any of you could spot methods of de-escalation, the 5 Ds, or examples of the oppression we defined in the slides before, it would be helpful if you guys can pop it in the chat or write it down somewhere so you could remember later.
You can reshare then share the audio too.
Oh, right.
Stop sharing and then reshare then share the audio.
Okay, since we just watched the video, it would be helpful to, point out what type of oppression we're seeing and also the stages of bystander intervention that are applied as well as de-escalation strategies. In this scenario, it's obviously racism towards a Black man. The woman in the video, the actor, they specifically positioned her to do this behavior because of suspicion, just because the babysitter is a Black man. And with the stages of active witnessing, you see multiple times in the video that a lot of the diners consider this a problem. They interpret it as a problem. They notice the event and they decide to find ways to help. And most of the diners in this scenario, they decided to distract, or in this scenario, they decide to focus on the lady who is instigating this behavior. They decide to tell her, hey, don't do this. Hey, that's not right. Hey, why are you doing this? And also others decide instead, hey, let me comfort and help the person who's being targeted in this behavior. Like the man who was like, oh, you guys are just having a normal conversation, a normal dinner. I don't know what this lady is saying. And all of these behaviors are a way to intervene. You could also see that one of the diners, they decided to go to the manager after they saw the lady start taking pictures. This is a situation in where she gets outside help because she can't prevent this woman from taking pictures, right? She feels that it would be helpful to get outside help, and with the manager in tow, she could have someone else to help intervene. So yeah, this was a pretty good example of ways other people could intervene. And we hope that it helps you identify ways that you could do the same in scenarios if you come across them.
Hey kiddos, you guys enjoying?
All right, now we're gonna go into situations like the one you see in the video. We're gonna go into situations, and we're also gonna talk about some actions that you could take. And Maggie is gonna go over the situations here.
These are fake scenarios, but they can happen in real life situations. So you're going to the school for your first day, you see someone picking on a student who doesn't look like everyone else, who is unique. You decide not to do anything because you're afraid that you will put more attention on yourself. You ignore it and you go along the rest of your day. Weeks pass by and the bullying is really consistent. You decided to record the bullying to see if there was anything you could do. There wasn't much on the video, but you gained confidence and stood up for them. Next morning, you went up to the bully and told them to stop. They didn't listen to you, but you already have a recording. That was enough information for the principal to get the bully in trouble. So like people in that situation that don't speak up first, like it's not the biggest problem because they do it at the end anyway. But if you didn't help the victim at all, like the victim itself or the target could have done something worse to someone else or to themselves, like self-harm or like, maybe like hurting another student since they can't bear the pain of their own. Leaving someone else to intervene can allow mental and emotional damage to happen. So if I were the bully and I was bullying like Sophia, Sophia could have like, not been in a good mental health place, and like it would have made her life worse. And the bully, which is me, could have like, maybe I might be struggling at home, but that shouldn't give like the right for me to like take the anger out on someone else. Intervening instead of being a bystander helps save people. having at least someone looking out for you is important because it's not okay letting the vulnerability fight its own battle. Standing up for someone changes lives, and since we are all ordinary, projecting our voices to help one another makes them extraordinary. Situations where you can intervene every day, like there are situations where like you can intervene because like you don't just stand there and like not help, but if you're afraid, like that's okay, but like there are other ways you can like intervene and help others. um since like we're in New York and there's like a stereotype where like New York City, like we mind our business, so like you usually, like if you were to see someone down the street getting like harassed, usually people would just like continue walking and go along their days. Like one day maybe you hear someone yelling out racist slurs to an Asian woman. You didn't sit there and do nothing about it, and you defend her, yelling at them to stop, and they shouldn't be talking about another person like that isn't right. So next stop on the train, the person yelling racist slurs gets off because like you yourself helped, and like it made that situation for them uncomfortable because like they probably didn't expect anyone to help because usually no one helps. And if you didn't stand up for that woman, she could have like been ashamed for her race, or like worse, being like assaulted for being her race. And like you can't control race because like it's not something you can pick and choose. It's like not. um I'm a Asian woman myself, and I'm thankful for. I would be really thankful for someone who will stand up for me, especially if it's something I can't control. It's not only Asians who get hate crime on a daily basis; it's other minorities, and someone who has a power, such as white people, who don't usually get targeted for their race. Um, they would stand up, which shows courage because um, other people, such as white people, who don't experience racism as much as other minorities, can like show the other people their perspective, and like it shows them that they're strong. Everyone should intervene in situations even if they think someone else can help them. Like you could be like saving someone's life and like you wouldn't even know. And remember, if you access any situations that could be dangerous to you, you can intervene in other ways without harming yourself as well. Like recording a situation or calling a police. Like police, like they can like back off, like they can like get someone to back off since they have a higher authority. And there are some situations you're going to ignore, but it's also important to have someone looking out for you because not everyone will look out for you. In my experiences, I've always loved to work, like help other people, because like I don't like seeing people feel like they're being belittled. And one of my best friends, like she was bullied for being like a different size, and it's very common to be bullied for your looks as a kid. And I just couldn't stand there and let them like degrade her like that. So I told them to stop and told the teacher. And the teacher took the situation to her hands and spoke to her personally after that situation. And she never made like a comment about her parents ever again. One thing I did, and it made a difference in her life, and it prevented what could have happened if I haven't stood up for her. She could have been like going through like body dysmorphia, or like maybe like an eating disorder for being like a different size. And like me knowing that I could have prevented that like made me a better person and made me feel better about myself, knowing that can help someone else. um But in my experience, in fifth grade, I was bullied for my appearance by a group of older guys consistently, and they were my brother's friends, and it damaged my mental health, especially when I was a kid, because nobody stood up for me. I was like ashamed for myself, and I wish someone would have stood up for me. And I was in fifth grade, and most of the kids who bullied me were like in middle school and high schoolers, and no one stood up for me. And I felt really ashamed of myself, and I was hating everything about me. And I wished someone stood up for me. Like my brother could have stood up for me, but he didn't, which made me like make physical changes about myself. And it's really important to be a bystander because you can literally save someone's life. Like it's not like figurative language, you can impact someone's life. and it doesn't matter how, but that person will remember you forever. So that's like a good side of it. And I wish someone would have intervened, and I'm glad I learned how to intervene. And knowing that I can help people by using my own voice is powerful. And voices in general are powerful, and it should be heard.
Yeah, that's the end of it. Thanks everyone for stopping in to listen to the workshop. And I guess all of us will say bye now.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining and listening to our workshop.
Yeah, bye. Have a nice day.
All right then. I think that's it. Nana, I think you're still recording.
All right, great.